Welcome to this deep dive. We take complex ideas and try to pull out the insights that really matter for you.
Exactly. And today, it's all about personality and behavior.
Yeah, it's a huge field, right? So many different ways to look at it. We're not aiming for the answer today.
No, definitely not. Instead, we've dug into some really interesting material on how personality develops and, what happens when things go a bit sideways.
So the mission today is to unpack three key perspectives: Adler's individual psychology, Jung's analytical psychotherapy, and object relations theory,
We want to get to the core ideas, see where they overlap, where they differ.
and hopefully give you a richer way to think about, well, us, humans,
Yeah.
all the complex stuff.
So where do we kick off? Adler seems like a good place to start.
Alfred Adler. Okay, he was around the same time as Freud, but took a different path, didn't he?
He really did. While he didn't ignore our experiences, he shifted the focus, less on those deep, unconscious sexual drives Freud talked about, and more onto social factors, and crucially, our goals for the future. It's more like teleological, looking at where we're headed.
Okay, so less digging only in the past, more looking at the pull of the future.
Yeah.
And his big ideas were inferiority feelings and striving for superiority.
That's the heart of it. Adler believed everyone feels inadequate sometimes, starting in childhood. Feeling weak physically or socially or just inside.
We all feel less than at some point.
Exactly. But, and this is key, Adler didn't just see it as a negative, he saw it as the engine, the motivator, that inherent push towards what he called perfect completion.
So that feeling of not quite measuring up actually drives us to grow, to become more.
Okay.
And how we do that, how we try to compensate and reach that completion,
Yeah.
that's the style of life.
Precisely. The style of life is our unique blueprint for dealing with inferiority and striving for superiority. It's kind of the unifying theme of our personality.
And Adler saw healthy ways of doing this and less healthy ways.
Yes, he made a critical distinction. It all hinges on something he called social interest.
Social interest, meaning.
Basically, a genuine concern for others, for the community. A healthy style of life, for Adler, involves goals that show optimism, confidence, and this connection to others.
Okay.
A mistaken style of life, on the other hand, is more self-absorbed. It's about competition, personal power, often at the expense of genuine connection.
Right, so it's about whether your striving includes others or is purely self-serving. And how does this style of life actually form? You mentioned early family stuff.
Hugely important for Adler. He thought those first experiences in the family are incredibly formative, and that the basic style of life is pretty much set by age 4 or 5.
Wow, that early.
Yeah. He talked about, for instance, being pampered, overly coddled, which he thought could get in the way of developing that social feeling.
Makes sense. Spoiled kids maybe don't learn to consider others as much.
Kind of, yeah. Or the opposite extreme, being neglected. That could breed resentment, a need for revenge, or just deep mistrust.
Okay, so those early dynamics really set a pattern. So someone ends up with a mistaken style of life. How does Adler see that playing out as, like, psychological problems?
Well, for Adler, maladaptive behavior is essentially that mistaken style of life in action. It shows up as unhealthy ways of compensating for inferiority, maybe being obsessed with power, and definitely lacking that social interest.
So someone always needing to one-up others or control everything that could stem from this early pattern.
That's the idea. It's an attempt to feel superior, but in a way that doesn't really connect or contribute positively.
And Adlerian therapy, then. What's the goal there? How do you address that?
It's very collaborative. The therapist and client work together almost like detectives to uncover and understand that style of life, where it came from, how it works, its consequences. The ultimate aim is to help the person re-examine their core beliefs and redirect their goals towards something more constructive, more socially connected.
So it's about bringing those patterns into the light and then finding better ways forward. I remember reading about the lifestyle investigation. What's involved there?
That's a key technique. It digs into the family constellation, like birth order, relationships with siblings.
Oh, right. Adler was big on birth order.
Yeah, and also looks at the person's fictional goals, those often unconscious ideals driving them, and what he called basic mistakes, which are like fundamental flawed beliefs about life, self, others.
Fascinating. And these ideas aren't just for individual therapy, are they?
Not at all. Adlerian concepts are super useful in groups, family therapy, couples counseling. even in schools.
How so?
Well, think about parenting or teaching. There's that program, Systematic Training for Effective Teaching.
Hmm.
It's based on Adler's idea that kids' misbehavior isn't random, it's goal-directed.
A goal. Like what?
Adler identified 4 main goals, often unconscious: getting attention, fighting for power, seeking revenge, or sometimes displaying inadequacy, basically acting helpless as a faulty way to feel like they belong or get special treatment.
Wow. Looking behind the behavior for the need. That's powerful.
It really is. Understanding the goal changes how you respond.
Okay. Let's shift gears now. Carl Jung, another giant, also started with Freud but went his own way.
Right. Jung shared some ground with Adler, like seeing personality as broader than just Freud's focus and acknowledging future goals. But his big split was around libido.
Libido, Freud's sexual energy thing.
Exactly. For Freud, it was primarily sexual. Jung saw it much more broadly as general psychic energy, a life force, you could say.
Okay, a wider definition of what drives us.
Yeah.
And Jung's model of the mind is pretty layered, isn't it? Conscious, unconscious.
Very layered. You've got the conscious mind, run by the ego, dealing with the outside world, our thoughts, feelings, what we perceive right now.
Standard stuff.
Then beneath that, the unconscious, and Jung split that into 2 parts.
Okay.
The personal unconscious, which is kind of like Freud's idea stuff we've repressed, forgotten, experiences that didn't quite register consciously.
Well, my own forgotten baggage.
Pretty much. But then there's the collective unconscious.
Yeah.
This is uniquely Jungian.
And that is.
He saw it as this deep, inherited layer shared by all humans. Latent memory traces from our ancestral past, like universal human software.
Inherited memories. Wow. That's deep.
It is. And residing in this collective unconscious are the archetypes.
Archetypes, I've heard that term. Universal patterns.
Exactly. Primordial images, themes, patterns of behavior that shape how we experience the world, regardless of culture. Things like the hero, the mother.
Okay. And he highlighted specific ones like the self, persona, shadow, anima and animus.
Those are key ones, yeah.
Yeah.
The self is that drive towards wholeness, unity in the personality. The persona, that's our public mask, the face we show the world.
Like our social media profile, maybe.
Huh, yeah, could be. Then the shadow, that's the dark side, the stuff we don't like or repress about ourselves. And the anima is the inner feminine in men, the animus and the inner masculine in women.
Those inner opposites. And he also talked about attitudes, introversion, extroversion, and functions like thinking, feeling.
Right. We all have both attitudes, but one usually dominates. Same with the 4 functions: thinking, feeling, sensing, and intuiting. One tends to be more developed, more conscious.
So a thinking type versus a feeling type, an introvert versus an extrovert.
Yeah.
Basic personality dimensions.
Exactly. And Jung's view on development was also different from Freud's. He didn't put all the emphasis on early childhood.
How so?
While Freud thought the first 6 years were basically everything, Jung saw development as a lifelong process. He actually emphasized the second half of life, after the mid-30s, as a time for major growth and change.
Interesting. A midlife transformation.
Kind of. This leads to his concept of individuation.
Individuation. Becoming an individual.
More like becoming whole. It's the process of integrating the conscious and unconscious parts of ourselves, personal and collective, bringing it all together to become uniquely yourself.
Integrating the shadow, the anima and animus, all that.
Exactly. And Jung thought this process, especially later in life, leads to wisdom, a deeper connection to spiritual or philosophical concerns.
So it's about embracing all of who you are. How did Jung view psychological problems then, if it's not all childhood stuff?
Jung saw symptoms not just as problems to get rid of, but as messages. Unconscious communication saying something's out of whack, something needs attention. There's a task there, a potential for growth.
So the symptom is actually pointing the way. Symbolic.
Very much so. It's the unconscious trying to get the conscious mind's attention.
And Jungian therapy tries to decipher these messages.
Precisely. The goal is to reconnect the conscious and unconscious. Interpretation is key, especially of symbolic material. Dreams are huge in Jungian therapy.
Why dreams?
Because Jung saw dreams as a direct line to the unconscious, especially the collective unconscious, expressing itself through universal symbols.
Okay, so analyzing dreams helps understand those deeper messages. What about the therapist-client relationship?
Also crucial, Jungians look closely at transference, how the client projects unconscious material onto the therapist. It's seen as vital information.
Not just personal stuff, but archetypal projections too.
Absolutely. And they also consider countertransference, the therapist's own unconscious reactions. Overall, it's quite an optimistic view, emphasizing that drive towards wholeness, looking at the present through the lens of this lifelong journey.
Really different feel. Okay, third perspective. Object relations theory. This one shifts focus again, right? Back to relationships.
Big time. Object relations theory fundamentally argues that our basic drive isn't for pleasure, like Freud said, but for relationships.
Yeah.
We are object seeking from birth. The object usually means people, especially caregivers.
So connection is the primary motivator.
Yes, and it emphasizes those very, very early relationships and how we internalize them.
Internalize them. Like we carry them inside us.
Exactly. We form internal representations, they call them introjects, of significant people and our interactions with them. These become like internal templates that shape all our future relationships.
Inner blueprints for relationships.
Oh, wow.
Okay. And key figures here are Klein, Fairburn, Mahler, Kernberg. Let's maybe focus on Mahler's developmental ideas. They seem very foundational.
Mahler's work is fascinating. She mapped out how an infant goes from, well, basically not knowing they're separate to developing a distinct sense of self.
How does that start?
She called the first month normal infantile autism. The baby's mainly world is internal sensations, not much awareness of outside.
Okay, tuned inward.
Then comes the normal symbiotic phase. The baby's aware of mom, but it's like they're merged. No clear me versus not me.
Still fused. When does the separation happen?
That's the big one. The separation individuation phase, starting around 4 or 5 months, it has subphases.
Okay, break it down.
First, differentiation, baby starts exploring, visually, physically, noticing they are separate, then practicing crawling, walking, moving away, feeling that thrill of independence.
Toddler exploring the world.
Right. Then comes rapprochement. This is really interesting. The toddler becomes more aware of their separateness and they get anxious. They run back to mom, needing reassurance, then push away again, that push-pull.
Ah, the terrible twos. Conflict wanting independence but still needing mom.
Exactly. And finally, if all goes well, they achieve object constancy around age 3. This means having a stable internal sense of self and a stable internal sense of mom, or the caregiver, as separate but reliably there, even when not physically present.
So you carry that secure base inside you. How does this relate to problems later on?
Well, object relations theorists see maladaptive behavior as stemming from problems in these early relational stages. Mahler linked issues in separation individuation to later psychopathology.
Hiccups in that process cause trouble down the line.
Yeah, and a really key concept here is splitting.
Splitting.
It's a primitive defense. Babies tend to see things in black and white. Mom is either all good when needs are met or all bad when frustrated. They can't hold both aspects at once.
Okay.
Healthy development involves integrating these good and bad aspects into a more realistic whole view of people. If that integration doesn't happen properly,
You get stuck seeing people as either angels or demons.
pretty much, you might idealize someone one minute and completely devalue them the next. There's no middle ground, no complexity.
And Otto Kernberg connected this specifically to borderline personality disorder.
Yes, his work heavily emphasizes this failure to integrate positive and negative experiences of self and others as central to BPD, leading to that instability in relationships and self-image.
That makes a lot of sense. So object relations therapy focuses on.
The goal is often to provide a corrective emotional experience, a supportive, accepting therapeutic relationship where the client can revisit those early patterns safely.
Like a do-over for those early bonds.
In a way, it's about bringing those unconscious relationship dynamics, those faulty interjects, and the splitting into awareness. The aim is to help the client develop more integrated, realistic, and stable internal representations of self and others, repairing those internal blueprints.
So working through the splitting, basically. Building that object constancy that might have been missed.
Exactly, helping them relate to themselves and others in a more whole, less fragmented way.
Okay, wow. We've covered a lot of ground. 3 very different ways of looking at things.
We really have. You've got Adler focusing on where we're going, our goals, and that need for social connection, for community.
Right. Then Jung taking us deep into the personal and collective unconscious, the archetypes, that lifelong journey towards wholeness, individuation.
And finally, object relations, zooming right in on those crucial first relationships and how they build our internal world, our capacity to connect.
It's just striking how each one offers such valuable yet distinct pieces of the puzzle, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. No single theory has all the answers. But putting them together, You start to get a much richer, more complex picture of what makes us tick and what happens when things go wrong.
It definitely gives you more lenses to look through for understanding yourself and maybe the people around you.
For sure. Each perspective highlights something crucial.
This has been incredibly illuminating. So maybe a final thought for you listening.
Mm.
As you think about Adler's striving and social interest, Jung's inner depths and archetypes and object relations focus on early bonds.
What resonates most with your own experience, your own development, your relationships?
Yeah, what new perspectives might these ideas spark for you on your own journey?
Yeah.
Definitely something to chew on. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.